Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. And all of you are looking at me funny all of a sudden. There's an obvious reason for that. And actually, there's a selfish reason from that. From a preaching standpoint, it's the most consistent holiday in some ways. It always hits on the same day. And it's nice from a preaching perspective because you can kind of enjoy a couple of days and still usually have Saturday then to kind of catch up and make sure you're ready to get into the pulpit and do your work on Sunday. But it's interesting, this year kind of got turned upside down a little, with a lot of things going on. Some family things changed, and so we worked a little different schedule with when we were going to meet with family this year, a little different than we normally would. It's a little bit unusual to attend a funeral in the midst of that on Wednesday, preach a funeral on Saturday in the midst of that, and receive a phone call in the midst of all of that saying you're going to have another funeral the next week. It can take the Thanksgiving out of you a little. And it got me to thinking a little bit about how do we manage that? How do we manage when life starts throwing things at us and it's working to try to rob me of the Thanksgiving? And I don't mean Thanksgiving Day, and I don't mean turkey and stuffing and potatoes and those things. I mean when it tries to rob me of the heart of Thanksgiving. When it tries to turn me into someone who isn't very grateful or thankful for much because I can't seem to see past the burdens that are around me. And so I've been thinking about that over the last several days, and so I wanted to share this message with you this evening. Now, I'll warn you ahead, you can use the bulletin kinda, because you got version 1, I'm preaching version 2. It's the same basic lesson. Most of the scriptures are the same. I'm going to add a few. I took a few out. And I rephrased things to fit more of how I was feeling about it. And so you may get a little lost if you're trying to follow it in the bulletin. And so I might encourage you just to watch the screen tonight because it may be a little easier. It's there in the bulletin, just slightly different. But I want to talk a little bit about this idea of how is it that I can take Thanksgiving and allow it to create in me something that works for my benefit and good. How is it that I can become thankful in such a way that it's not just words, it's not just a holiday every year in November, that it's a mindset and a heart and disposition that allows me to carry me through those difficult days, that allows me to stay steadfast in my thanksgiving and gratefulness despite what might be going on around me. And let me open with a couple of texts, first in Psalm 100 and verse 4. And notice the thought of the psalmist. In fact, though, this, by the way, is the only slide that didn't change in some form or fashion. But in Psalm 100 and verse 4, enter into His gates with thanksgiving and into His courts with praise. Be thankful to Him and bless His name. Now, what's interesting to me about that psalm is simply this, or at least this is what I thought of as it relates to my mindset right now. There was no qualifier there that said, if you feel good, go and express your thanksgiving unto God. There was no qualifier there that said, if life is grand and wonderful and there are no consequences or challenges or difficulty in your life, go praise the Lord. He just said, be thankful and go praise it. And somehow I've got to learn to be able to do that. In some form or fashion, I have got to be able to educate myself in such a way, lead myself in such a way, build a heart within me that will allow me to be eternally thankful to God, irregardless of what may be happening in my life around me. How do I create a spirit that allows me to do that? How is it that I can daily, if so be, enter into the gates of the Father with thanksgiving? How is it that I can be grateful and thankful on a daily, consistent basis without thought or consideration that there may be things that are trying to rob me of that thankful spirit? Because it can happen, right? We almost got to this text. Or actually, we did get past this text this morning in our study in verse 21 of Romans chapter 1. But notice what he said of this entity. different kind of thought that was expressed in Psalm 100 and verse 4. In Romans 1:21, he says, because although they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor were thankful. Isn't that kind of an interesting description within this challenge? Here was folks that should have known and understood about God. There was plenty of evidence manifest to them that they should have been able to draw the right conclusions about the Creator and who God was. But he also adds that they weren't very appreciative of their knowledge of God. Psalm 100, let's go and praise the Lord. Let's bring thanksgiving to the courts of God. Let us have a mindset of gratitude, irregardless of what my circumstance might be. And then the contrast, Romans chapter 1, of those who knew God, understood Him at least at some level, but refused to be thankful for that. And then add the text that Chad read a few moments ago in 1 John chapter 5. There's a phrase at the end of verse 3 that I think we need to stop and consider for a moment. He challenges us in this text to obey the commands of God. And then he says to us, and the commands of God are not grievous, I think King James, burdensome in other translations. How do I get to a point where I can simply be grateful and thankful for the commands of God and not view them as challenging or burdensome or harmful in some way? Again, how do I create in myself a spirit of thanksgiving that can transcend beyond the things that want to rob me of that thankful spirit? And so let's look at that for a few minutes. And here's where the Scriptures kind of stay the same, but the phrases change. First, we need to be thankful for the opportunity to honor what we've committed to God. If we have professed Him as our Savior and Lord, if we have acknowledged that we want to seek the salvation that He brings to us, then we need to build a thankful spirit that I can pay the vows that I owe Him. In Luke chapter 14 and verse 28, for which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going to make war against another king, does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. Now, that may not sound like something that necessarily would usher in the idea of thanksgiving, does it? That sounds like work. That sounds like when I decide that I'm going to serve the Lord, I'm going to have to actually serve the Lord. When I make my vow and covenant and promise to God, now that sure sounds like to me that God's saying, don't even make that commitment if you're not ready and willing to honor that commitment. And I suppose we could look at it from that angle, and that's certainly part of what Jesus is saying. But let me flip to the other side of that for a minute. If you plan right, and you build the foundation right, and you get the tower built, there's thanksgiving in the success of the tower. If you plan right, and you organize your men right, and you go out to war and you win the battle, there's thanksgiving that can be offered for the success of the battle. Lord, thank you for the opportunity to commit myself to you that leads me to salvation. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to commit myself to you in such a way that brings reward and benefit that has eternal consequence to it. Thank you for the opportunity to honor what I have committed unto you. Sometimes it's just perspective that needs to change. To look at what God is asking of me, and to look at what's before me in my service to Him, and to view it through the eyes of thanksgiving that the Lord would even afford me this opportunity to honor Him and to serve Him and commit to Him and to honor my covenant with Him. In Jonah chapter 2, Jonah chapter 2 and verse 9. Jonah basically has been now in the belly of the great fish for a little period of time. Well, 3 days, right? And he's having this conversation with God. And in the midst of that conversation with God, he says, I will pay my vows with thanksgiving. I will pay the vows that I owe unto you, and I'll do it with a grateful spirit. Now, was Jonah all that grateful when God first asked him to go into Nineveh? No. Was he grateful for the opportunity to offer a message of repentance to a people that he wished God would just have destroyed? No. But it's amazing, I guess, what 3 days in the belly of a great fish will change, right? And Jonah finally begins to realize that he should be thankful for any opportunity to honor what the will of the Father is. And maybe that's kind of the interwoven message of God in relationship to those things. Ron. And so you can appreciate the idea that here's this opportunity for Jonah to commit himself with this great vow and promise and honor that promise as he gets vomited out onto the shore from the belly of that great fish. You and I need to be grateful. How do I create in myself a spirit, an understanding heart that says I am willing to pay the vows? It's an honor to serve God and appreciate the opportunities to do such. Thank you for the opportunity at times to learn from others. I can create sometimes a spirit of thanksgiving in my heart when I watch the example of others and their service unto the Creator. You know, sometimes we can lose our thankful spirit because we've decided that the burdens that I'm bearing are greater than that which anybody else has ever carried. Now, in a particular moment in time, your burdens may be greater than mine. In a particular moment in time, your burdens may have great contrast between what others may be going through in a particular moment in time. The Ecclesiastes writer said, though, that there is nothing new under the sun. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes we may not know. We sometimes assume that the other guy's got it better than I do, and that may not be the case. And sometimes I need to take great strength and courage from the fact that we look at others who are battling and facing challenges, and they continue to be grateful and thankful despite the difficulties that they're under. I think about men like Moses, who had it great. He's the grandson of Pharaoh. He had more blessings than he could count. But he said by faith, verse 24 of Hebrews 11, by faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer afflictions with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasure of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. The obligation, if you will, that we have, or the opportunity that we have to be thankful for the blessings that come through Jesus Christ, and know that may mean at times we don't have the same kind of earthly blessings that others have. At times we have to restrain the things that we do in order to honor the will of God. But I take courage. I'm edified to know that there were men like Moses, and there have been many others, and many that I've actually known personally in this life, that have shown great thanksgiving and great gratitude in the face of adversities that I may never have experienced. And I become more grateful, hopefully, by witnessing that. Let me share maybe a clearer example of that in 2 Corinthians chapter 9. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and in verse 8. He said, and God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. As it is written, He has dispersed abroad, He has given to the poor, His righteousness endures forever. Now may He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food supply the multiply the seed you have sown and increase the fruits of your righteousness. Get the mindset here for a moment. The hope here is that when people witness the encouragement and the activity and the service of the church in Corinth, that it won't just simply be the seeds that they produce or the bread that they send, but people will become grateful and thankful for what Corinth has done, and they will also want to follow in that example. We see those who are serving with gratitude. We see those who are extending aid and assistance and help and are thankful for the opportunity to do such. And it encourages us to do the same. While you are enriched in everything, verse 11, for all liberality which causes thanksgiving through us to God. Paul witnessed their liberality, their generosity, their willingness to give, and he says, it invited me to offer thanksgiving to God for you. The encouragement that it brought to Paul and the appreciation and the thanksgiving that he offers before the throne of God when he witnesses those who are so committed to serving and honoring and being helpful unto others. While through the proof of this ministry, verse 13, they glorify God for the obedience of your confession to the gospel of Christ and for your liberal sharing with them and all men. You know what I appreciate about this thought is that people get a glimpse of God when they witness people's generosity, and it's generosity that comes with thanksgiving and appreciation, and there's a grateful attitude that's motivating that generosity. They get a glimpse of who God really is and what He's about, and they get to witness what God is doing in the lives of others. I saw a picture one time. I may have shared this with you now that I say this, but I saw a picture one time of a fella, and the caption said that the preacher was baptizing this fella, and the caption said, "Now, sir, everything goes to Christ when you're baptized." And the next picture was the man being baptized with his wallet out of the water. He wasn't ready to give that. And the imagery was that that's the way some are, right? I'm ready to give a lot, but there's some things that I'm going to withhold for myself. But I love the spirit here and the education and the encouragement it brings to us. He said, your liberality, your willingness to share with others allows others to be appreciative and thankful and grateful for what God is doing for them. By their prayer for you, who long for you because of the exceeding grace of God in you, thanks be to God for His indescribable gift. Have I ever been jealous of what others were able to do? And I just want you to stop and think about it. Have you ever, and it's one thing to say, well, I wish I could have done more for this circumstance or this person. And we might say, well, I wish I could have, that guy is sure, and sometimes, though, it goes just beyond the idea, well, I sure wish I could have done more. But it goes to more of a jealousy over what this man or this woman or this entity was allowed to do. Apostle Paul didn't have enough money, by the way, to help all the saints that needed help. And he didn't grow jealous over those who did have the resources to help. In fact, he brought thanksgiving before the throne of God because there were people available who could help. One of the things that helps me to create and keep a thankful spirit within me and a grateful spirit is to simply say when others are able to assist and help, when others do good works and service towards others, just be thankful for that. Don't sit back and say, well, boy, yeah, oh, sure, they can always get to do, all that kind of mindset we have. Create in me a thankful heart. I'm grateful for what others can do sometimes. It may be beyond my abilities. It may be beyond my resources. It may be beyond my talents for me to be able to do that. But I'm thankful that somebody else was able to help. I'm thankful and grateful that others were able to step in and fulfill this need, whatever it might be. And that's exactly what he's describing here. I'm thankful for the dedication of others. I'm thankful that I have examples before me of those who want to serve the Lord and honor Him. I'm grateful, not jealous of those who've shown great faith and determination. I'm thankful and grateful when I can witness the success over temptation. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. You remember the story of Joseph, right? He's in the house of Potiphar. He's raised, he's elevated or been elevated to a pretty prominent position within the household. In fact, his own description here in verse 9 is, there is no one greater in this house than I. Joseph says to Potiphar's wife, I have been elevated to no higher position there exists in this household. No one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you. I have access to anything and everything in this household, Joseph said, but he said, not you. You belong to Potiphar because you are his wife. Now notice, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? You could play a lot of what-if scenarios out of this text. But I want us to simply remember, what did this cost Joseph? Well, it cost him an imprisonment, a lot of time out of his life. It cost him his position, at least for a period of time, within the kingdom. It cost him a lot. And yet he still seemed to be thankful and grateful for his relationship with his Creator. And he never lost that spirit about it. I wonder sometimes in our mind whether we've been programmed to gravitate towards failures. I saw a guy the other day make a comment. He wondered how successful an all-positive TV channel would be. He just wondered. How it kind of got that, by the way. It's called Hallmark. But anyway, we'll look at that another time. But he wondered about that, right? How many people would subscribe to an all-positive TV channel? Because it sure seems like that for the most part, they've convinced themselves that which is negative sells the most ads. But here's my point. This to the world's eyes would be a story of horrible proportions. This poor fellow that ended up in prison. This poor man who lost all the benefits and glory of being in the household of Potiphar. Boy, maybe he should have reconsidered that decision. Look at all that he gave up just to honor his God. I am thankful for examples. I am grateful for men like Joseph who teach me that though there may be earthly consequences to winning the victory over temptation, though there may be earthly consequences to the choices and decisions that I make to honor God over man's desires, ultimately, there's a spirit of thanksgiving and gratefulness that God is a rewarder of those who win victories over temptation. God rewards those who face those challenges and come out successfully. and honoring their God. Lord, thank You for those kinds of examples that teach me that not everyone is giving in to temptation. Not everyone is doing all the things that everyone says they're doing. That there are good folks who are striving to honor their God, and even if it brings some consequence, create in me a thankful spirit. A grateful spirit that says, I can serve the Lord and not concern myself with the consequences, because the ultimate reward is far greater than any of those consequences. Create in me a spirit of thanksgiving, that as a follower of Jesus Christ, I know that I have at least one burden that is light. Think about it in that perspective for a minute. I don't want you to dwell on this long because it's depressing, but I just want you to think of a couple of things that right now might be burdensome to you. Some load you may be carrying right now, and it's heavy. And the truth is, I could go around the room and there'd be a lot of burdens that we could talk about, right? There's a lot of heaviness. A lot of things that challenge us and trouble us. A lot of things that bring us to sadness. I was walking up the street. I walk to the building most of the time when I come over here. I was walking up the street tonight, and a car come up behind me. And for a half a second, I thought, I wonder if John Boy's going to give me a ride. Because he'd do that all the time. He'd stop if he'd see me walking. And the first couple times John stopped to pick me up, I'd say, no, John, I like this couple of minutes. It clears my head a little, and I like this walk, and it's just kind of my thing. But after about the third or fourth time, I thought, you know what? John's trying to do what he can do. And I just need to be thankful and appreciative that he wants to give me a ride over here to the building. So I got in the car and rode. Right? I appreciate the example of folks like that. But it was burdensome for me to have to stop and consider, no, that's not. It's not John coming by me. I only say that to remind us that we all have things like that, right? Now read the text. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. You got burdens? Bring them, Jesus says. You've got heavy loads to carry, you're heavy laden, bring them. Bring them. And here's what's great about it. Not only will I give you rest, what I exchange with you is this. And take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle. Wouldn't it be nice to deal with everyone when they're gentle? Isn't it a lot more pleasant to deal with folks when they're gentle and lowly in heart? Where they approach you gently, where they approach you with a humility about them. That's how Jesus says He is. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and ye will find rest for your souls. Now here it is. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. I know about you, but I need at least one thing in life that fits that description, right? I need at least one thing that I'm addressing, dealing with, challenged by. I need at least one thing that I can describe as easy and light. And Jesus says that's exactly who I am. Jesus says that's what I offer unto you. Bring me the heavy things. I'll help you with those. And in return, I'll give you a lighter burden in which to carry. Create in me a thankful spirit, Lord, because you offer unto me an opportunity to bring the heavy things to you. And give me the lighter burden to carry. I can stay in a thankful and grateful spirit. It doesn't mean there won't be sadness. It doesn't mean there won't be things to have to overcome. There doesn't mean there won't be temptation and challenge. what it means is Jesus allows me to make an exchange. He gives rest for the heavy burdens and exchanges a lighter one if I'll follow Him. Thank you. Have you ever been carrying 16 things and you could barely handle 2 of the 16? And it just so happens, one of the simplest things in life, you're walking through a parking lot somewhere and you see somebody handling more things than they can carry, and what do? Hopefully, you walk up and say, what? Can I help you? And there's just something positive and wonderful and good when you just take a moment and say, let me help you with that load. Let me help you with that burden. That's exactly what Jesus is saying. Create in me that thankful spirit, Lord, and help me to recognize that I can be such on a daily basis because I bring the heavy things to you and you give me the lighter things to carry. You do the heavy lifting. And let me carry the lighter things. Which then allows for that service to be joyful. And our relationship with Christ to be encouraging. And it brings a joy that couldn't be experienced in other ways. In verse 8 of chapter 40, of Psalm 40 probably I should say, I delight to do your will. Oh my God, and your law was within my heart. I delight to do your will. It brings joy because your will is not grievous. 1 John 5 verse 3. Your burden is light. Matthew chapter 11. The psalmist said in Psalm 119 verse 14, I have rejoiced in the way of your testimonies as much as in all riches. I will meditate on your precepts and contemplate your ways. I will delight myself in your statutes. I will not forget your word. Basically, the psalmist is saying, if you had a pile of gold or this message that is more precious than gold, which would you choose? He says, your words are more precious than gold. Your thoughts and your message is greater than any riches or wealth that anyone could extend unto me. I am thankful, Lord, that I don't have to have a lot of money. I don't have to have a lot of life's blessings. As long as I've got your word, I can be thankful and grateful and recognize the joy of service unto you. Let me share one last text. Genesis 29. And verse 20. Genesis 29 and verse 20. The example of Jacob. He said, so Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. There ain't a writer in the Hallmark staff that can write that any better. Right? What a beautiful sentiment. That remember, by the way, he got tricked. He was supposed to work 7 years and get Rachel to begin with, but he got Leah instead and had to work another 7 years in order to get Rachel. But it did not seem long to him at all. Because he loved her. And he was grateful to be able to finally receive her. We need to serve the Lord with such gratitude that the days will seem few. We need to serve the Lord with thanksgiving and such appreciation for what He's done for me, for the example of others that are around me, for the benefits that He extends, even when I've got heavy burdens, for the opportunity to kind of exchange those with Him. And at the end of our days, we can look back and say, oh, they felt so few. And not just because life is but a vapor. They felt so few because I loved every moment of every ounce of service that I extended unto the Creator. Jacob was able to say that because he loved Rachel. And the only way we'll be able to say that is if we love the Lord. With all our heart, with all our soul, with all our might. If we will love the Lord thy God with those things every day, you and I can't help but be grateful for the benefits that it brings. If you and I will honor Him in that way, we will love every minute of what we give and offer unto God. It doesn't mean that we love everything that man does. It doesn't mean that we love every action of every person or every moment. But I can love every ounce of what I've done for the Lord because of His service unto me and His gifts unto me. And tonight, if you're subject to the Lord, there's no better way to express your thanksgiving to Him than to serve Him, to obey Him, to honor Him. A greater way could we express our thanksgiving unto Him than to step into service to Him. If I've never experienced the remission of sins through baptism, or I've never honored Him, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, why not tonight? Show my thanksgiving to Him for this great opportunity to find cleansing of my sins, or show our expression of thanksgiving for an opportunity to be restored unto Him, to serve Him once again, and to honor Him again. How thankful are we for what God has done? And have we extracted the benefits from it so that it creates in us a spirit of thanksgiving that permeates all other things? And that we express our thanksgiving unto God in every moment of every day that He blesses us with. And if we can encourage you to step into His promises tonight, we invite you to come while we stand and while we sing.